Thank you, Dave. Thank you for a really insightful analysis. One thing I wonder is George Bush was eminently successful in appealing to Hispanics. What happened?
George Bush got, according to the best exit polls, a little over 40% of the Hispanic vote. McCain got 32%. And we all talked about after the 2008 election, boy, if we get 32% of the Hispanic vote, we're in real trouble. Mitt Romney got 27%. And only 27% of the Hispanic vote, he got about that same percentage of the Asian American vote, which are the two largest growing racial demographics in the United States. There is no future in that. Here's how I want Republicans to look at it. I think everybody gets the algebra, basically. But here's how I want you to approach it attitudinally. And I'm more a campaign guy than a policy guy. Imagine we're running a grocery store. It's the Republican grocery store, and it's across the street from the Democratic grocery store. And we want people to shop at our store. We want our store to be successful. We want customers. And we think we get customers by putting good quality stuff on the shelf that has a good amount of consumer choice at a fair price. And that's a pretty good model. But it's only a good model if people will actually come in the store. Now, if you really believe, as I do, that you have a better selection, higher quality, and a better price, but you're losing the battle for customers, then let me look at it this way. Then we are not doing a good enough job of making people feel welcome in the store. And that is the store owner's problem. That's our problem. And I started at the beginning, no whining, no complaining, no excuses. Folks, the customer is always right. If the customer doesn't feel welcome, that's because of something we've done and we got to fix it. So that's what happened. I think we had a politician in George Bush who was uniquely successful in Texas at doing that. And he had a really good experience dealing with the diverse electorate. And we've lost that lesson along the way. I absolutely believe we can regain it. But folks, the math is the math. You know, we either fix this condition or this condition fixes us.
Glad to have you back. One thing I've observed here, I don't think you said anything about the women's vote.
Right.
And I am concerned, we had a couple of Senate races that the Republicans could have won in Indiana and Missouri. I think that's pretty well determined. We had a couple of candidates keep their mouths shut, right? Now, I'm wondering if you think maybe this abortion issue ought to be scaled back. I mean, these single issue interests. And the late Jack Ransom, the Republican National Committee man, said this abortion issue is going to rack the Republican Party. And Mitt Romney, they made a big issue out of blinders of women and the women's vote and so on. So what do you think about that? I'm just curious.
Let me start with the obvious. If you're going to be in a debate, practice. Let me just start with the obvious. If you're going to be in a debate, practice. All right. Second of all, I reject the premise of your question. Okay. If you look at the female vote, and you look at this in a big data set, okay, how did Mitt Romney do among married women? He carried married women by 7. He got beaten very badly among unmarried women, as most Republican candidates do. The reason for that, may I suggest, we had a lot of work on this at the Wirthlin Group when I was there, and I worked for Dr. Richard Wirthlin, President Reagan's pollster. The biggest reason there, frankly, is economic security issues. If you look at the largest groups of unmarried females, they're first of all widows. Okay? Women on average live about 7-8 years longer than men. So you've got, in the oldest age cohorts in the United States, is very disproportionately female because men die sooner. Demographic fact of life. That population is more dependent upon government transfer payments, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, than any other population. And that is the primary driver of that. Remember, among the women's vote, among married women, Republicans win. But among unmarried women, they get beaten very badly. What we call a gender gap is a second-order effect of a marriage gap among females. But that is driven by the economic conditions primarily of those female voters. The other largest group of unmarried women is younger women, particularly younger women with children. I'm not telling you anything you don't know when I say a majority of long-term households on public assistance are unmarried women and their children. Again, a group that is very economically vulnerable. So we do need to speak to that. But let me suggest what is described as a women's issue driven by social issues, if you drill down to the data, is more an economic security issue driven by the differing life circumstances of female voters. All right? There are more female voters in the United States, according to Gallup, who identify as pro-life than pro-choice. I reject the premise of your question. It's just not true.
Did you take a message back for our governor and tell him thank you for denying the health care exchange from the Obama administration?
And thank Governor Nixon of Missouri as well. We were bipartisan.
There we
Yeah.
go. Well, I appreciate it. The second part, though, is speaking to the diversification issue here that we face in our party. I'm Hispanic, and I feel right at home in the Republican Party. I
Bless
feel
you.
right at home with the conservative principles. There's not an issue, really, in not reaching out because we had Marco Rubio, we had Susana Martinez, we had Condi Rice, we had Mia Love, we have Nikki Haley, we have tons of diverse people within our party. The problem seems to be a communication error of how we articulate our conservative principles. How do we look to address that, making that message there and communicating that easily?
And let me start with one of Dr. Worthland's axioms. Never pick an argument with the data. Okay? If you're getting 27% of the Hispanic vote, we're doing something wrong. If we're getting 26% of the Asian American vote, we're doing something wrong. Okay? Let me start with show up and listen. Okay? Again, I'm more a political guy than I'm a policy guy. What I really want to drive to this group is how absolutely essential it is, if the Republican Party is to play its role in helping this republic to fulfill its ambitions. We must be politically successful to do so. We must win elections and gain political power to do political good. And it is algebraically true that in order to do so, we must earn a more diverse coalition, and that our orientation towards doing so should be that the customer is always right. And as a storekeeper who needs to gain customers, we should change our behavior. I defer to a lot of other people on how that is or how it works out in policy and communications. Okay, but let me start with showing up and listening. But thank you very much for being here and for what you said.
Do you feel that had Rick Santorum, who did great in the primary with almost no money and almost won the primary, do you think that he would have won this election? And do you think that Romney made a mistake by keeping silent about abortion and not drawing the distinction and bringing the women's vote over?
Would Santorum have done any better? I don't know. Senator Santorum won 2 elections in the state of Pennsylvania. He did so once in 1994, which was an historically good Republican year. He did so again in 2000 under an unusual set of circumstances. I would note in 2006 he was beaten very badly in Pennsylvania. And his numbers in Pennsylvania and other states, pretty comparable to Governor Romney. Do I think it would have been manifestly different? I can't prove a counterfactual. My instinct is no. Should Romney have talked more about the life issue? I think Romney should have talked about more issues in general.
Yes,
I think there was a notion that the country was dissatisfied with the president, therefore they were going to fire him. I think the first premise wasn't enough, and the second obviously wasn't true. The way I would have approached this election, and I'm a GoPack guy, so I'm allowed to steal from Newt whenever I like. Gingrich, for all his shortcomings, I thought had a heck of an idea, which is, first of all, you do an updated version of the contract with America. You go out there and say, here are the first 10 things I'm going to accomplish. You go out there on the Capitol steps, you stand up there with the Republican members of Congress. People who bother to vote in these elections are pretty sharp. The 60% of Americans who vote, they pay attention, they watch the debates. Issues matter. And tell them, look, this is the majority it takes to get this done. Elect me, elect this majority. Here are the first 10 things we're going to accomplish. We only ever tried it once and it worked great. And I think if Romney had spent more time talking about that and being specific with people about how a Romney administration would be different and the effect it would have in their lives, I think we could be having a different conversation today. Greg Gable.
You don't think that part of the problem also is the fact that Republicans don't work together, number one, and number two, the minute the election is over, we close up shop and we don't do anything until 6 months before the next election. Last time in 2010, I met with the local leadership and said, hey, I've got people that are willing to form committees to go out and reach out to the Hispanic and the black community and try and build a coalition, try and gain voters in that thing. And I got zero. I mean, they just stonewalled us, and they refused to work with Tea Party people, at least locally, and stuff like that. You can't be the party of exclusion and the party of, hey, let's close up shop for the next 2 years and still win.
I think that's one of the great lessons here, is that there are no timeouts in this game, and that either you're moving the ball on the other side or the other side's moving the ball on you. I can tell you we are 725 days to the 2014 election, and the Brownback campaign operation's up and running. Thank you for coming. Question is, how should the Republican Party approach the immigration issue? We are still the party of the rule of law. Okay, that still has to be the basis of anything we do. But you've got some very concrete proposals out there by Senator Rubio. I think you may see something that comes up from the House Judiciary Committee here soon. My suggestion is, first of all, address it. Okay, don't stop talking about it. But do so in a way which is consistent with the rule of law and which is genuinely compassionate and workable. Don't ignore it. Don't say nothing. Be proactive.
After the redistricting debacle, we've had a number of districts that are now 35% Republican, 30% Democrat, the rest are undecided.
Right.
Kind of a two-part question. One, are they going to look at any redrawing again? And two, how do we appeal to those undecideds? We had a lot of races, Brenda Landwehr, Tim Garvey, even Michaels were very close, and we have to get more of those undecideds to vote for us.
Under the Kansas Constitution, the redrawing of state legislative boundaries may occur only once every 10 years. So the maps we have now are the maps, period. They were drawn by a federal court in June. Those are the maps we're going to live with through the 2020 election, period. How do we appeal more to the unaffiliated? I think you saw in some of the Gallup data I provided that unaffiliated or independent voters, folks who identify that way, tend to share some basic Republican views on things. We did very well among unaffiliated voters in 2010. In Kansas in 2012, we did pretty well. I think you go there on bread and butter issues, which in state government is prosperity and quality education. Yeah.
You speculated a little bit on Rick Santorum, which I don't think we've ever had a chance. But what did you think about Newt Gingrich?
You know, I'm a GoPack guy, so I drank the Gingrich Kool-Aid a long time ago. I think Newt Gingrich should be chairman of the National Republican Congressional Committee for life. I think he's one of the great strategists and thinkers and talkers we've ever had, and that would be a great role for him. But a great colonel isn't necessarily a great general, and a great general isn't necessarily a great brigadier. Yeah. Two questions there. Let me take each in turn, reverse. What's the attitude towards term limits? I think it's interesting. You look at every state that has the initiative process, a process by which citizens can introduce by petition legislation that will be binding within that state. Every one of those states has term limits for state legislators. No state that lacks initiative has term limits for state legislatures. I'm not familiar with any legislature in the United States, federal or state, which has ever imposed them on themselves. In Kansas, man, term limits are here. Gosh, we're going to have 43 new Republican members of the state House. We're going to have 13 new Republican members of the state Senate. So 50, there's only 165 legislators in the state of Kansas. 56 of them, more than 1/3, will be brand new Republicans elected their office in 2010. So Kansas appears to have turned over pretty well. I have been a supporter a long time of term limits at the federal level. I would speak and brag a little bit on my boss here, Sam Brownback. He was one of a few number of federal office holders who took a term limits pledge. He said term limits were a good idea. It helped you keep in touch with your constituents. It kept you from going native in Washington. When he first stood for the United States Senate, he said, I will serve no more than 2 terms in the United States Senate. And he kept that pledge. And of his own accord, did not seek re-election to the United States Senate. I'm a fan of term limits. They're a populist issue that Republicans should consider working on again. But I want to give just 1 minute to your other issue you talked about, which was the debt in the United States. Let me again talk about why this cause isn't over and why there should be no cause for defeatism and why we need to stay the course and stay at it. When I was here in January, I said something that I'm going to repeat, which is if something can't go on forever, then it will stop. If something can't go on forever, then it will stop. When George Bush left office, the publicly held debt of the United States was 41% of GDP. That's not the debt that we owed to the Social Security system or IOUs in the Treasury. That is the money we had to finance to operate government that we had to borrow from other people by selling them government securities. It's 41% of GDP. So if we were a household that had a $50,000 income, we owed $20,500. At the end of the 4th year of the Obama administration, we have gone from a publicly held debt of 41% of GDP to 73%. So again, that household that has a $50,000 annual income, we've gone from $20,500 in debt to $36,500 debt in 4 years. Now you're going to reach a tipping point here. People argue about where it is. Is it 90% of GDP? Is it 100? Is it more than that because of the unique role of the United States and the role the dollar plays as a world's reserve currency? But at some point here, you're going to enter what was called, I thought best by Erskine Bowles, former chief of staff to Bill Clinton, co-chair of the Bowles-Simpson Deficit Commission. You're going to reach bond market jail, where your people won't buy your bonds anymore. If you read Bob Woodward's book, The Price of Politics, about what I have to say was a very unimpressive performance by the president on fiscal issues, Timothy Geithner openly speculates, what if we have a bond auction and nobody shows up?
I wrote that.
Okay, good. So if that happens, the only way you can get them to buy your securities is by offering them non-economically high interest rates. So now you're borrowing money to pay the interest on money you already owe, and then you're in the death spiral. Then you're in jail. You never get out. When Paul Ryan talks in the debates about a debt crisis, that's what he means. Okay? I encourage you to look at the places where Democrats win all the elections, like California. The state of California just raised taxes. I gotta say, that's great news for Kansas. Okay? We've been gaining people in business from California for a long time. A great data set you can look at, go to the uhaul.com website and find out how much it costs to rent a U-Haul to go from point A to point B. The more it costs, the more people are naturally moving in that direction. The less it costs, you're going against the trend. It's very expensive to get a U-Haul from California to Kansas, less so to get one from Kansas to California. It's expensive to get a U-Haul from Kansas to Texas, less so to get one from Texas to Kansas. They will pay you to run a U-Haul from Texas to California. Okay? If you look at the states that John McCain won and the states that Mitt Romney won, that were John McCain's, he won all the states that McCain won. Those states were worth 6 additional electoral votes in 2012 than they were in 2008. Why? Because over the course of the last decennial census, if you assume a static population, about 1.5% of the U.S. population, about 4.5 million people, got up and moved from the blue states to the red states. It's the old Berlin joke, which system is better for people? I tell you what, tear down the wall and see where the people go, then you'll know. Okay? Growth matters, state policy matters. Okay? And the current trajectory we're on for debt is unsustainable. And if you think that, you're one of the defeatist core, folks, when this debt crisis hits, and if we don't dramatically change direction, it will, you're going to see similar to what happened with the Labour Party in Britain in the late 70s when the United Kingdom went into IMF receivership. And the product of that was Margaret Thatcher.
Hey, what about the social issues driving the Obama vote in so many states? We had like 3 of them that were voting pro-gay, and you had the pro-drug legislation in several states. Then you had the weakened crime laws like down in Florida. And all those things to me would have brought out the Obama vote.
I haven't seen a lot of state-specific data on the effect of some of those state initiatives on turnout or turnout's effect. I'll say this. When the debt crisis hits, it's going to swamp everything else. Okay? You all have been great. I'm happy to hang around. Thank you so much for what you do and for being here today. Thank you.